Well, I guess we'll go ahead and get started. Um, we've got some visitors. We've got some old timers. We've got some people in the room that I've known my whole time since I've been here in Pennsylvania, which was 2007. So there's a smorgasbord. And this is one of those teachings where I thought it would be a good idea to go back to the basics. Um, there's room for learning regardless of where we're at in this walk. There's teens and young adults in the room. There's youngsters. There's even babies, apparently. We're really glad to hear that Chris didn't go through too much pain during that childbirth. I was really worried about him. Anyway, so this teaching is called the Continuity of Torah. And if you're here today, it's probably because you believe that there is continuity of Torah. If you didn't, what are you doing keeping the Sabbath? What are you doing attending a group like this? So this is meant to be, originally my plan was to give a deep dive comprehensive thing. Like let's just do a single teaching where we just give an open and shut bulletproof case that we can use to kind of reinforce our own thinking and maybe fill in some holes in our logic, because sometimes when we go to try to explain this to people, sometimes they can trip us up. They'll ask us a question and we may not have an answer because maybe we hadn't thought through that. And I quickly realized that that was not going to happen, because it really would be a 3-hour teaching if I was to do that, and I don't want to do that to you guys. So I decided just to kind of go, just to focus on the logic of the whole thing, because the mainstream presents this idea that the Torah was given to Israel through Moses at Mount Sinai, and it went up to Calvary. And depending on your denomination, maybe it ended at the cross, maybe it ended on Ascension Day, maybe it ended on Acts chapter 2 on Pentecost. There's different flavors, but generally around that time frame when Messiah died, that's when the Torah ended. And of course, that includes the sacrificial system, that includes the festivals, the Sabbaths, that includes a lot of the quote unquote moral laws. And so I'm going to make the case today that if we just think logically, there's no setup for that. And rather than just give a bunch of verses that people can say, well, here's a list of verses that show that we should be keeping the Torah, what I want to do is I want to present a foundation of logic that we can hopefully use, like I said, to kind of shore up our own understanding and maybe get something in our arsenal that we can use when we're challenged on why we do this. We can actually approach the logic of it, even if we don't have chapter and verse ready at hand, because not everybody is a walking, talking Bible. I know I'm not. I can kind of quote scriptures and stuff, but if you ask me the address, half the time I can't tell you the actual chapter and verse, so I can't be the only one. We're going to start off in Amos chapter 3, and I'm going to read the whole chapter, and there's a reason for that. Amos chapter 3. Hear this word which Yahweh has spoken against you, sons of Israel, against the entire family which he brought up from the land of Egypt. Which, by the way, it's interesting, just a little sidebar, he says, sons of Israel. Did he only bring Israel out of Egypt into the wilderness? No, he brought a mixed multitude. Dare we say Gentiles? So Hebrews and Gentiles were all there on Passover. They were all there on Mount Sinai. It was never just for Israel. It was never just for the Jews. It was for anyone who was willing to join themselves to Yahweh. Verse 2, you only have I chosen among all the families of the earth. Therefore, here's some serious business. I will punish you for all your iniquities. Do two men walk together unless they have made an appointment? Or some translations more accurate will say an agreement. Does a lion roar in the forest when he has no prey? Does a young lion growl from his den unless he has captured something? Does a bird fall into a trap on the ground where there is no bait in it? Does a trap spring up from the earth when it captures nothing at all? If a trumpet is blown in a city, will not the people tremble? If a calamity occurs in a city, has not Yahweh done it? Surely Yahweh Elohim does nothing unless he reveals his secret counsel to his servants, the prophets. And we're going to use that verse as a linchpin for everything today, but I'm going to keep going. A lion has roared. Who will not fear? Yahweh Elohim has spoken. Who can but prophesy? Proclaim on the citadels in Ashdod and on the citadels in the land of Egypt, and say, assemble yourselves in the mountains of Samaria and see the great tumults within her and the oppressions in her midst. But they do not know how to do what is right. They don't know how to do what is right. I wonder why that would be. Declares Yahweh. These who hoard up violence and devastation in their citadels. Therefore, thus says Yahweh Elohim, an enemy, even one surrounding the land, will pull down your strength from you, and your citadels will be looted. Thus says Yahweh, just as the shepherd snatches from the lion's mouth a couple of legs or a piece of an ear, so will the sons of Israel dwelling in Samaria be snatched away, with the corner of a bed and the cover of a couch. Hear and testify against the house of Jacob, declares Yahweh Elohim, the God of hosts. For on that day that I punish Israel's transgressions, I will also punish the altars of Bethel. The horns of the altar will be cut off, and they will fall to the ground. I will also smite the winter house together with the summer house. The houses of ivory will also perish, and the great houses will come to an end, declares Yahweh. So I wanted to start here because, like I said, that one verse, surely Yahweh does nothing unless he reveals his secret counsel to his servants, the prophets. Now, obviously, I got up this morning and I made myself some tea and I had a nice breakfast and I worked on this teaching a little bit, finishing it up. Did Yahweh reveal that to his prophets? No, he didn't. He didn't reveal that we're going to be meeting here today to the prophets. So he's not talking about literally everything that Yahweh does, he reveals to his prophets. I think, based on the context here, he's talking about the big stuff. The big, important, relevant stuff that Yahweh's going to do, he tells his prophets first. He doesn't just spring it on us and people are like, wait a minute, where is this coming from? This is totally out of left field. There's always a setup. Every big move that Yahweh does, he sets up first through his prophets. And that's what we're going to see here. And he's talking about accountability here. These are people that knew to do good and didn't. And this is talked about in the book of James. To those who know to do good and don't, it's sin. These are people that had all the information. They had the Torah. They had prophets rising up daily telling them, hey guys, let's knock it off and repent. And so they don't have an excuse to wonder, like, why is all this crazy stuff happening to us? So imagine the level of accountability here. Yahweh is judging this people very harshly for their disobedience to his Torah. That tells us that obedience to his Torah is important to him. This is part of the logical foundation that we're laying for later. Let's go over to Matthew 23 in the New Testament. I got a gnat trying to get in my eyeball here. Ooh. I don't know why that is. They don't go after me anywhere else. They always go straight into my eyeballs. And I'm allergic to them, so then I get itchy eyes and I get hives, and so this could be an interesting episode here. Matthew 23. I'm going to read the whole chapter. Actually, no, I'm not going to read the whole chapter. Let's pull this up here. I'm just going to start reading in verse 13. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, because you shut off the kingdom of heaven from people. For you do not enter in yourselves, nor do you allow those who are entering to go in. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, because you devour widows' houses, and for a pretense you make long prayers. Therefore you will receive greater condemnation. Accountability. These are people that know better, and they're not doing better. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, because you travel around on sea and land to make one proselyte. When he becomes one, you make him twice as much a son of hell as yourselves. Woe to you, blind guides, who say whoever swears by the temple, that is nothing. But whoever swears by the gold of the temple is obligated. You fools and blind men, which is more important, the gold or the temple that sanctified the gold? And whoever swears by the altar, that is nothing. But whoever swears by the offering on the altar, he is obligated. You blind men, which is more important, the offering or the altar that sanctifies the offering? Therefore, whoever swears by the altar, swears both by the altar and by everything on it. And whoever swears by the temple swears by both the temple and by him who dwells within it. Whoever swears by heaven swears by both the throne of Elohim and by him who sits upon it. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you tithe mint and dill and cumin, and have neglected the weightier provisions of the Torah, justice and mercy and faithfulness. But these are the things you should have done without neglecting the others. So these people are expected to know both the weightier provisions of Torah and the less weighty provisions, and they're focusing on the less weighty. They're missing the point. You blind guides, verse 24, you blind guides who strain at a gnat and swallow a camel. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you clean the outside of the cup or the dish, but inside they are full of robbery and self-indulgence. You blind Pharisee, first clean the inside of the cup and of the dish, so that the outside of it may become clean also. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you're like whitewashed tombs, which on the outside appear beautiful, but inside they are full of dead men's bones and all uncleanness. So you too outwardly appear righteous to men, but inwardly you are full of hypocrisy and lawlessness, anomia, without law, without Torah. These are people that are supposed to be teaching the Torah to the people and doing the Torah. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you build the tombs of the prophets and adorn the monuments of the righteous, and say, if we had been living in the days of our fathers, we would not have been partners with them in shedding the blood of the prophets. So you testify against yourselves that you are sons of those who murder the prophets. Fill up, then, the measure of the guilt of your fathers. You serpents, you brood of vipers, how will you escape the sentence of hell? Therefore, behold, I'm sending you prophets and wise men and scribes. Some of them you will kill and crucify. Some of them you will scourge in your synagogues and persecute from city to city, so that upon you may fall all the blood guilt of all the righteous shed on the earth, from the blood of righteous Abel to the blood of Zechariah, the son of Berechiah, whom you murdered between the temple and the altar. Truly, truly, I say to you, all these things will come upon this generation. Jerusalem, Jerusalem, who kills the prophets and stones those who were sent to her. How often I wanted to gather your children together, the way a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, and you were unwilling. Behold, your house is being left to you desolate. For I say to you, from now on you will not come to me until you say, blessed is he who comes in the name of Yahweh. And so he's kind of rebuking the Pharisees and scribes pretty hard here, because they know the Torah, and they're not really doing it, at least not for the right reasons. Now, as a point of logic, we're taught that this is somewhere around 30 AD when all this is happening. There's different debate on exactly what year, but somewhere around that time. And so, not too long after this, we're taught in the mainstream that he was just going to do away with the law. So, as a point of logic, why is he giving these guys such a hard time for their handling of the Torah if he's just going to turn right around in a few weeks and say, it's done, we're good. It's finished. We'll do that in a minute. The whole it is finished thing. It's obviously important enough to him that he is condemning these people for their handling of it. And so it's a whole continuity thing. In my opinion, I think that scriptures bear this out. It started off important to Yahweh. It stayed important to Yahweh, and it will always be important to Yahweh. There's not a point where Yahweh's just like, oh, this thing that was so huge to me is all of a sudden, no big deal. It doesn't make sense. It's not logical. Let's go back to Genesis. We're going to go to Genesis 17. Genesis 17. We're going to read verses 1 through 14. Genesis 17, 1 through 14. Now, when Abram was 99 years old, Yahweh appeared to Abram and said to him, I am Elohim Almighty, or El Elyon. Walk before me and be blameless. That word blameless has to do not with perfection as far as like without sin, but it has to do with completeness. It's when you're looking for an animal that you're going to sacrifice, it needs to be a perfect animal without blemish. You're looking at it, there's nothing wrong with it. There's no damage. There's no missing organs. It's 100% intact, 100% functional. That's what this word means. Abraham is supposed to be blameless, but he's doing it covenantally. I will establish my covenant between me and you, and I will multiply you exceedingly. Abram fell on his face, and Elohim talked with him, saying, as for me, behold, my covenant is with you. You will be the father of a multitude of nations. There we say Gentiles. No longer shall your name be called Abram or Abram, but your name shall be called Abraham. For I have made you the father of a multitude of nations. I will make you exceedingly fruitful, and I will make nations of you, and kings will come forth from you. I will establish my covenant between me and you and your descendants after you throughout their generations for a temporary covenant until the cross, until Calvary, until whenever. Nobody's Bible says that, does it? It says what? Everlasting, right? Some might say perpetual. Everlasting. I like to say this. When I think of like the idea of everlasting life, I don't want my everlasting life to have a terminator point. I don't want it to have an end. Otherwise, it's not really eternal. Like for it to be eternal or everlasting, it needs to be eternal or everlasting. So this covenant here, setting us up, this covenant's not going to have an end. So if we go along to the New Testament later and we say Paul said that the covenant ended, well, that doesn't compute. We've got a foundation that we're establishing here, and we have to stay within the parameters of its boundaries. To be Elohim to you and your descendants after you. Verse 8, I will give to you and your descendants after you the land of your sojournings, all the land of Canaan, for an everlasting possession. There's that word again. And I will be their Elohim. Elohim said further to Abraham, now as for you, you shall keep my covenant, you and your descendants after you, throughout their generations. This is my covenant which you shall keep between me and you and your descendants after you. Every male among you shall be circumcised. You shall be circumcised in the flesh of the foreskin. I'll keep this PG. It shall be a sign of the covenant between me and you. Every male among you who is 8 days old shall be circumcised throughout your generations. A servant who is born in the house or who was bought with money from any foreigner who is not of your descendants, a servant who is born in your house or who was bought with your money shall surely be circumcised. Thus my covenant will be in your flesh for an everlasting covenant. But an uncircumcised male who is not circumcised in the flesh, that person will be cut off from his people. He has broken my covenant. So all these people in Abraham's household, these are not his biological descendants. We could call them employees in modern parlance. They're supposed to all get circumcised as part of this covenant. So we have this idea, again, that it's not just for biological Hebrews. It's not just for biological descendants of Abraham. It's for anybody that comes in under Abraham. Abraham is kind of the throughway into this covenant. And there's a reason why in Galatians, Paul spends so much time talking about Abraham to a bunch of Gentiles who Abraham should be irrelevant for unless somebody is reading Torah to them, unless they're going through and reading about Abraham, which why would they? They're a bunch of Gentiles who don't need to. Another point of logic. They have all this information, and he's relying on them to know this. So when he talks about Sarah and Hagar later in Galatians, he's appealing to that because they know the story of Sarah and Hagar. Why would a bunch of random Gentiles who were doing paganism a few weeks ago up in Galatia know anything about Sarah and Hagar? You know, like in modern terms, we would just have people go out with the New Testament and say, here, let's talk about the gospel. No Old Testament. Maybe they bring a book of Psalms. Maybe, you know, if they're Gideons. But anyway, yeah. I used to remember, like, when I was a kid, every time I go to a hotel, I would always open up the drawers and look for the Gideon's Bibles. For whatever reason, I just thought that was so cool. It's like, why are they missing most of the Bible? They got the New Testament. Anyway, because they don't see the continuity in Torah. For whatever reason, the people that put Bibles together like that see the New Testament as being more important and more valuable than the Old Testament. And I like how Brad Scott used to always say it. It's not new. It's just true, as in the New Testament, the true Testament. Okay, so that kind of establishes this whole forever language and that it's not just for biological kin of Abraham. So let's go up a little bit to Exodus chapter 20. Can anyone under the age of 15 tell us what happens in Exodus 20? Anyone under the age of 15? Either you guys are short and I can't see your hands, or nobody knows. Oh, I see somebody back to the back. Oh, bingo. Winner, winner, chicken dinner. All right. So we're going to read Exodus 20, verses 1 through 21. If I can get there. And of course, this is the Ten Commandments. Elohim spoke all these words, saying, I am Yahweh your Elohim, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself an idol or any likeness of what is in heaven above, or on the earth beneath, or in the water under the earth. You shall not worship them or serve them, for I, Yahweh your Elohim, am a jealous Elohim, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children, on the third and the fourth generations of those who hate me, showing loving kindness to thousands, to those who love me and keep my commandments. You shall not take the name of Yahweh your Elohim in vain, for Yahweh will not leave him unpunished who takes his name in vain. Remember the Sabbath to keep it holy. That's what we're doing today. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath of Yahweh your Elohim. In it you shall not do any work, you or your son or your daughter, your male or your female servant, or your cattle or your sojourner who stays with you. For in 6 days Yahweh made the heavens and the earth, the sea and all that is in them, and rested on the seventh day. Therefore Yahweh blessed the seventh day and made it holy. Honor your father and mother, that your days may be prolonged in the land which Yahweh your Elohim gives you. You shall not murder, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not steal, you shall not bear false witness against your neighbor, you shall not covet your neighbor's house, you shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or his male servant, or his female servant, or his ox, or his donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor. All the people perceived the thunder and the lightning flashes and the sound of the trumpet and the mountain smoking. And when the people saw it, they trembled and stood at a distance. Then they said to Moses, "Speak to us yourself, and we will listen. But let not Elohim speak to us, or we will die." Moses said to the people, "Do not be afraid, for Elohim has come in order to test you, and in order that the fear of him may remain with you, so that you may not sin." So the people stood at a distance while Moses approached the thick cloud where Elohim was. So this is so important to Yahweh that he is actually descending on the mountain and verbally communicating this to the people. And of course, it's so terrifying that they want Moses to intervene, and so they don't have to hear this terrible voice. It actually says in the Hebrew, I believe, it says they saw his voice. And that's how do you see a voice? It's interesting. But the point I wanted to highlight here is he says here, "Do not be afraid," in verse 20, "for Elohim has come in order to test you, in order that the fear of him may remain with you, so that you may not sin." So he's talking to them and he's giving them these commandments, and this is a way of testing them to see if they'll fear him or revere him and if they won't sin. So after Calvary, we don't need this same level of testing, right? Like, we're better. We've evolved spiritually. We're like spiritual primates that evolved from goo up into whatever, like they teach out in the mainstream. And like, we're super spiritual, man. We're so full of the Spirit. We don't need testing anymore. Like, no, we're the same people fundamentally. We have the same flaws. We have the same weaknesses. We have the same fallen flesh as these people did. So if they need to be tested by giving the commandments, why would we get a free pass? We're no better than these people. Deuteronomy 30, one of my favorite chapters. I've debated going into this if I wanted to read the whole chapter or not. I usually do, but for brevity, I might cut it a little bit short. I'll go ahead and read it. "So shall it be when all these things have come upon you, the blessing and the curse, which I have set before you, and you call them to mind in all the nations where Yahweh your Elohim has banished you, and you return to Yahweh your Elohim and obey him with all your heart and soul, according to all that I command you today, you and your sons, then Yahweh your Elohim will restore you from captivity and have compassion on you, and will gather you again from all the peoples where Yahweh your Elohim has scattered you. If your outcasts are at the ends of the earth, from there Yahweh your Elohim will gather you, and from there he will bring you back." I'll just pause real quick here. Here's a logical thing. This has not happened. We have had people of Israel brought back to the land in fits and starts over the centuries and millennia, but not everyone has come back. We haven't had the house of Israel come fully back. We haven't had the house of Judah come fully back. You can make the case that starting about 100 years ago, give or take, Judah started to come back in the land. What about everybody else? So this is a prophecy that has not been fulfilled. And he's coupling it with, when this happens, you people will remember my commandments and turn back to me. Why would we remember something at the end of the age that was abolished and done away with because it was a burden and a curse to us, like we're taught in the mainstream? Why would we want that? Logically, it doesn't compute. Verse 3, "Then Yahweh your Elohim will restore you from captivity and have compassion on you, and will gather you again from all the peoples where Yahweh your Elohim has scattered you." Verse 4, "If your outcasts are at the ends of the earth, from there Yahweh your Elohim will gather you, and from there he will bring you back. Yahweh your Elohim will bring you into the land which your fathers possessed, and you shall possess it. He will prosper you and multiply you more than your fathers. Moreover, Yahweh your Elohim will circumcise your heart and the heart of your descendants." Why? "To love Yahweh your Elohim with all your heart and with all your soul, so that you may live. Yahweh your Elohim will inflict all these curses on your enemies and on those who hate you, who persecuted you. You shall again obey Yahweh and observe all his commandments, which I command you today." That means that people stopped and they're doing it again. So we're the ones that hit the pause button on it. There's no indication in the text that he did. We're the ones, not us in this room, but humans, decided, no, we don't want to do this anymore for reasons. But now people are beginning to remember and come back. "Yahweh your Elohim will inflict all these enemies." Verse 9. Verse 9. "Then Yahweh your Elohim will prosper you abundantly in all the work of your hand, in the offspring of your body, and in the offspring of your cattle, and the produce of your ground. For Yahweh will again rejoice over you for good, just as he rejoiced over your fathers. If you obey Yahweh your Elohim to keep his commandments and his statutes, which are written in this book of the law, or the Torah, if you turn to Yahweh your Elohim with all your heart and soul." he's putting a very clear equal sign between loving Yahweh with our heart and soul and keeping his commandments. So if that was true for these people, why is it not true for us today? Are we, like I said, are we better than them in some way? Do we have some kind of, oh, we won the lottery? We don't have, like, we were born after this date in history. We were born on this side of the line on the timeline, so this stuff doesn't apply to us anymore. Yahweh is not a respecter of persons. He doesn't respect me any more than he respected these people that were being given these orations back then. So I take that very seriously. Verse 11, for this commandment which I command you today, I love this, is not too difficult for you, nor is it out of reach. What are we taught by the mainstream? The law was too hard. The law was against us. It was a burden. I have a relative who's a very, very dear brother. He's an evangelical, and he's on fire. But he loves saying that the whole purpose of the law was to show us that we couldn't keep it and that we needed Jesus. So was Moses mixed up here? Moses says we can do it. The prophets say we can do it. And we won't read it when you get into the New Testament. John the Baptist's parents, it says that they were righteous according to the Torah. It can be done. Now, are we still sinning? Are we still falling short? Yes. But his commandments are not burdensome. We're the ones that make it burdensome by adding things and taking away things and muddying it up and making it confusing and allowing our flesh to take the wheel. If we would just yield to the Spirit, it would be so much easier. Okay, so, verse 12. It's not in heaven that you should say, who will go up to heaven for us to get it for us and make us hear it, that we may observe it? Nor is it beyond the sea that you should say, who will cross the sea for us to get it for us and make us hear it, that we may observe it? But the word is very near you, in your mouth and in your heart, that you may observe it. See, I have set before you today life and prosperity and death and adversity. In that I command you today to love Yahweh your Elohim, to love Yahweh, and then the next thing he says is to walk in his ways, to keep his commandments and his statutes and his judgments, that you may live and multiply, and that Yahweh your Elohim may bless you in the land where you are entering to possess it. So again, another equal sign between showing love for Yahweh and keeping his commandments. We're not special. These people were told this. Why are we off the hook? But if your heart turns away and you will not obey, and this heart language is going to come into play later, our heart is turning away. That's an equal sign. It's related to us not loving, right? To us being drawn away. So you're drawn away and worship other gods and serve them. I declare to you today that you shall surely perish. You will not prolong your days in the land which you are crossing the Jordan to enter and possess it. I call heaven and earth, this is important, to witness against you today that I have set before you life and death, the blessing and the curse. So choose life in order that you may live, you and your descendants. How? By loving Yahweh your Elohim, by obeying his voice, and by holding fast to him. For this is your life and the length of your days, that you may live in the land which Yahweh swore to your fathers, to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, to give them. Now, he called heaven and earth as witness. This is really important. I'm looking outside. I see heaven and earth. They're still here. And of course, some of you are like, yeah, Matthew 5. Go to Matthew 5. We'll get there. We'll get there. This is really big because this sets up, again, how important this is to Yahweh. And Moses makes the equal sign here several times between loving Yahweh and keeping his commandments. And we have this same kind of everlasting language. We have the idea that it's not too hard. So when people come along later and twist Paul's words into saying that the Torah is too hard, there's no setup for that. There's no setup. Otherwise, Moses was wrong. Somebody's wrong. It's either Moses here or the people that are saying the law is too hard. Now, am I saying that keeping the commandments is a walk in the park and super easy? No. It takes dedication. It takes effort. It takes willpower. It takes self-control. But it can be done, at least as much as we're capable. All right. Deuteronomy 13, we're going to go back and read a couple chapters a little bit prior to this. Deuteronomy 13, we're going to read verse 1 through 5. And again, we're setting up a foundation here so that when we get to the New Testament, whatever our interpretation of the Torah in the New Testament needs to be in alignment with how it was set up in the Old Testament. Otherwise, we're falling into that trap that Paul talked about in Romans, where we're yielding to our flesh. Our flesh does not want to keep the Torah. So if our flesh doesn't want to keep the Torah, what are we going to do? We're going to look for ways out. We're going to look for loopholes. How can I get out of this? And of course, theology, studying God is not the same as knowing. Studying, it's like I can study, I don't know, bacteria, but that's not the same as knowing bacteria. That sounds weird, but anyway, we like to study and know things about everything, but that's not the same as having a relationship. So theology to me is just always people have that. I would rather have a relationship. But Deuteronomy 13, 1 through 5, if a prophet or a dreamer of dreams arises among you and gives you a sign or a wonder, and of course we see this all throughout Yahshua's ministry in the Gospels, and the sign or the wonder comes true concerning which he spoke to you, saying, let us go after other Elohim, whom you have not known, and let us serve them. So this is a prophet coming and doing signs and wonders and saying, hey, let's go away from Yahweh and worship Baal or whoever. This will be better, okay? But they're doing all this amazing stuff. Wow, look at, Okay, let's slow down and think here. You shall not listen to the words of that prophet or that dreamer of dreams, for Yahweh your Elohim is testing you to find out if you love Yahweh your Elohim with all your heart and your soul. So this prophet is coming along trying to bring people away, and Yahweh's allowing it to happen to see who is really invested in that relationship. Like, are you going to abandon Yahweh just because you see all this cool stuff happening? Matthew 5 later, or actually Matthew 7, talks about the people that come to him and say, Lord, Lord, we've done all these great things in your name. We've cast out demons and healed people. Great, that's awesome. That's great stuff. We would call that sign and wonders. But what does he say? Depart from me, you workers of lawlessness. I never knew you. Knew as in a relationship. Signs and wonders do not equal relationship. Verse 4, you shall follow Yahweh your Elohim and fear him. You shall keep his commandments, listen to his voice, serve him, and cling to him. How far did I want to go? Next verse. But that prophet or that dreamer of dreams shall be put to death because he has counseled rebellion against Yahweh your Elohim, who brought you from the land of Egypt and redeemed you from the house of slavery, to seduce you from the way in which Yahweh your Elohim commanded you to walk. So you shall purge the evil from among you. So this is a prophet who is leading people away from Yahweh, and it's clear that that is coupled with leading people away from his commandments. So if the test for a false prophet is, do they lead you away from Yahweh's commandments, was in place here, why would we assume that that changed? What's the logical basis? For today, somebody doing signs and wonders and saying, we don't have to keep the Torah, we can eat, pork chops and, do whatever, and I just casted out a demon, yay! Okay, we have a setup for this here. We're told to be on watch for that. This is a thing. Let's go to Deuteronomy 18. It's a kind of a similar idea here. Deuteronomy 18, how to identify false prophets. Deuteronomy 18, we'll read verse 15 through 20. Deuteronomy 18, 15 through 20. Yahweh your Elohim will raise up for you a prophet like me, this is Moses talking, from among you. From your countrymen you shall listen to him. This is according to all that you asked of Yahweh your Elohim in Horeb on the day of the assembly, saying, let me not hear again the voice of Yahweh my Elohim. Let me not see his great fire anymore, or I will die. Yahweh said to me, they have spoken well. I will raise up a prophet from among their countrymen like you, and I will put my words in his mouth, and he will speak to them all that I command him. It shall come about that whoever will not listen to my words, which he shall speak in my name, I myself will require it of him. But if the prophet who speaks a word presumptuously in my name, which I have not commanded him to speak, or which he speaks in the name of other Elohim, that prophet shall die. Now, this is a point of logic. We know the New Testament makes the case that Yahshua Messiah is the prophet like Moses. And you've got anti-missionaries like Tobias Singer, people like that say, no. This is not talking about the Messiah. This is talking about just the office of a prophet in general, right? And he'll say specifically it's talking about Joshua, as in Joshua, Moses and Joshua. Well, when you read Deuteronomy, you get into that whole text there, it plainly says, after Moses died, Yahweh had not risen up anybody that was a prophet like Moses. Well, what about Joshua? Joshua was in power at that time. Joshua could have been the guy like Moses, but the text itself says he wasn't. So when they get to the New Testament Gospels and we hear are you the prophet? Are you the prophet like Moses? There's a reason why they were thinking these things. There's a prophet coming like Moses. What did Moses do? Moses gave the Torah to the people. So if you're a prophet like Moses, why would you do the opposite? Why would you come and take away the Torah from the people if you're like Moses? You're not like Moses. You're like the anti-Moses. Like find that in Revelation. Everybody's looking for the Antichrist, but we got anti-Moses everywhere. So there's another point of logic there. So if we're going to accept that he is the prophet like Moses, he's not going to do things differently than Moses. This is, again, one of these logical foundations. So when people point to Paul and Hebrews and whatever, and they say, but see, here's where it changed, it's like, no, there's no setup for that. There's zero setup for anything changing. Okay, I have to go to Psalm 119, and we have to read the whole thing. Just kidding. We won't read the whole thing. We're just going to read the I believe it's the Dalet portion. We're going to read Dalet. Yeah, the Dalet portion. We're just going to read starting in verse 25. So Psalm 119, starting in verse 25. My soul cleaves to the dust. Revive me according to your word. I have told of my ways, and you have answered me. Teach me your statutes. Make me understand the way of your precepts, so I will meditate on your wonders. My soul weeps because of grief. Strengthen me according to your word. Remove the false way from me, which, if you want the false way removed from you, what are you saying? You want the true way brought before you, right? And graciously grant me your law. What are we taught in the mainstream? That law and grace are opposites. They're mutually exclusive. You have the age of law, and then you have the age of grace, which we're currently in. We're not under the law, we're under grace. David, for whatever reason, thought it was an act of grace for Yahweh to give the Torah. And if we just think about it, the Torah allows us to have, for the most part, there's gray areas, there's subjective things, because life happens, life is messy. You can't have every single thing accounted for in a text. It would be astronomically long. But we have a blueprint for how to live. We have a text that we can go to and we can point to and we can say, here's where it says, do this, don't do this. Here's Yahweh's standard of righteousness written down for anybody to read. That's an act of grace. We don't have to guess. We don't have to stumble around blindly wondering if we're sinning or not, wondering if we're doing the right thing or not. Generally speaking, at least on the big issues, we can go to the text and we can see how we're doing. That's an act of grace. Why would you take something away that David says was granted graciously? It doesn't track. Again, we have this foundation being laid. The law is good. It's for our benefit. It's eternal. It's everlasting. There's no setup for, and by the way, in a few thousand or 100 years, when the Messiah comes, he's going to do away with this thing that we've just been gushing about, the whole scripture. This great thing that David, if we were going to read the Psalm 119, we would really know what David thought of it. David thought it was the best thing ever since sliced bread and peanut butter and bananas on a sandwich. It's for my wife. I wanted to see if she would scream a little bit when I said that. Air conditioning, yes. Somebody said air conditioning, yes. Okay, so we'll keep reading though. Verse 30, I have chosen the faithful way. I have placed your ordinances before me. So he's associating Yahweh's ordinances with the faithful way. Aren't we supposed to kind of be in the way? Aren't we supposed to be a faithful people? I cling to your testimonies, O Yahweh. Do not put me to shame. I shall run the way of your commandments, for you will enlarge my heart. David clearly is pro-Torah. He thinks it's great. Did he not read Galatians? Obviously he did, and it wasn't written yet. But if I was to tell somebody this, if I was to speak this same kind of language, have you read Galatians? Didn't you read the book of Hebrews? That's what we would get, right? So we'll go back to Psalm 19. I could have done these in numerical order, but I figured I would spice it up a little bit. Psalm 19, and I will read the whole thing. It's short. Psalm 19. The heavens are telling of the glory of Elohim, and their expanse is declaring the work of his hands. Day to day pours forth speech, and night to night reveals knowledge. There is no speech, nor are there words. Their voice is not heard. Their line has gone out through all the earth, and their utterances to the end of the world. In them he has placed a tent for the sun, which is as a bridegroom coming out of his chamber. It rejoices as a strong man to run his course. Its rising is from one end of the heavens, and its circuit to the other end of them. There is nothing hidden from its heat. The law, the Torah of Yahweh, is perfect. Complete. Imagine that. Restoring the soul. The testimony of Yahweh is sure, making wise the simple. The precepts of Yahweh are right, rejoicing the heart. The commandment of Yahweh is pure, enlightening the eyes. Man, this sounds horrible. Why would anybody want to be a part of this? The fear of Yahweh is clean, enduring forever. The judgments of Yahweh are true. They are righteousness altogether. They are more desirable than gold, yes, more than fine gold. Sweeter also than honey and the drippings of the honeycomb. Moreover, by them your servant is warned. In keeping them, there is great reward. Wait, where's all this curse language that we're taught? Where's all this bondage? It's not here. Who can discern his errors? Acquit me of hidden faults. Also keep back your servant from presumptuous sins. Let them not rule over me. Then I will be blameless, that word again for complete, and I shall be acquitted of great transgression. Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in your sight, O Yahweh, my rock and my redeemer. Now, people like to talk about if you're under the law, you don't have grace, you don't have forgiveness. Okay, well, what did David just say here? He just said, then I will be blameless, I shall be acquitted of great transgression. He knows he's going to be forgiven of his sins, and there are other psalms where he explicitly says, Yahweh, forgive me of my sins, or my sins have been forgiven, while he's, quote unquote, under the law. So the law was never mutually exclusive to grace. It was never mutually exclusive to mercy. These things are fully compatible. And I would argue that they are two sides of the same coin, so to speak. They have to go together. You take one away from the other, you don't have a clear picture of what you're looking at. Let's go to Malachi 4. And I shaved off, like I said, several hours of what we could do through here. There's tons of stuff. In Isaiah 11, he says he's going to give us a new heart and a new spirit so that we can keep Yahweh's commandments. You go to the New Testament, it's like, oh, now we've got the Holy Spirit. Like, okay, why did Yahweh tell you he was going to give you the Holy Spirit? So that you could not keep his commandments? And just as a point of logic, why did Yahshua have to die a brutal death and be tortured the way he was on his nets? And go through that whole process to do away with the law that was so horrible and bad? He could have just said, no, sorry guys, I made a mistake. Or I underestimated your ability to keep these commandments. Sorry, I'm taking it away. You guys are off the hook. He's the lawgiver. The lawgiver can do things like that within the parameters of whatever covenant's established. But instead, he has this whole build-up through the prophets where everything's everlasting, everything's great, the Torah is this awesome thing, everybody's supposed to do it, but he's going to go through all of that to get rid of it, when he could have just said, you know what, let's just get rid of it. It doesn't track, it's not logical. Malachi chapter 4, we'll read the whole thing once I get to it here. And for those of you that have seen the Jewish Bible, you'll know that the Old Testament is arranged differently. It ends in Chronicles. Chronicles is one book there. And I think that it's Yahweh's providence that made it to where when we read the Old Testament in our English Bibles, or like the Catholic, the Protestant Bibles, Malachi is the last thing before we turn the page into the New Testament. To me, this has got the finger of Yahweh all over. I don't think this is accident. Malachi 4. For behold, the day is coming, burning like a furnace, and all the arrogant and every evildoer will be chaff. The day that is coming will set them ablaze, says Yahweh of hosts, so that it will leave them neither root nor branch. But for you who fear my name, the Son of Righteousness, S-U-N, will rise with healing in its wings. You will go forth and skip about like calves from the stall. You will tread down the wicked. Now, for a second, let's just put ourselves in the context of the mainstream. We're sitting in a church on Sunday. We're under the mainstream belief that the law is bad, the law is bondage. Yahshua did, or Jesus, they would say, did away with it. That's where we're at. Let's interpret this. You will tread down the wicked, for they will be ashes under the soles of your feet on the day which I am preparing, says Yahweh of hosts. Yeah, that's great. We love that. Yeah, okay. Remember the law of Moses, my servant, even the statutes and ordinances which I commanded him in Horeb for all Israel. Wait a minute. We don't like that one. Oh, let's keep going. Behold, I'm going to send you Elijah the prophet before the coming of the great and terrible day of Yahweh. Yeah, he's going to send Elijah. And of course, Yahshua talked about this. He talked about Elijah coming to restore all things. Yeah, that's great. He will restore the hearts of the fathers to the children and the hearts of the children to their fathers, so that I will not come and smite the land with a curse. Yeah, that's great. Okay. The one thing that they're not going to like in this is verse 4. Remember the law of Moses, my servant, even the statutes and ordinances which I commanded him in Horeb for all Israel. course, Romans 11, Paul tells us who all Israel is. It's anybody that covenants with the God of Israel in faith. That could be anybody. So to me, it's not lost on me that right before I turn the page, well, after I go past this almost blank page, it says New Testament. I have to go 2 pages. Once I get over into the New Testament, the first thing I see is, if I'm in the mainstream, oh, now we're in the gospel. So 2 pages prior, he just said, remember the law of Moses. And then now 2 pages later, we're supposed to forget the law of Moses. That's what we're taught. Now, there's no setup for that. There's no setup. And you can take my word for this. It's true. But you can also research it yourself. I'm thirsty. Tongue's getting all dry. Anyway, there's no setup. There's zero setup for the idea that Yahweh's going to give us Torah, and then the Messiah's going to come and do away with it. Zero. And the last thing we see before we get into the Gospels is remember the law of Moses. It's important to Yahweh that even though we're in the Gospels, even though we're in the New Testament, we don't forget the law of Moses. So this is what we have to work with as we turn into Matthew. There's nothing at all saying, oh, thank you, Dean, I appreciate that. There's nothing at all saying that this is going to be upended. And this is huge because we're going to read some stuff that happened to some of the apostles here. And we're going to put ourselves in the shoes back then and say, if this whole thing was laid, this whole foundation was laid, bulletproof, ironclad, unsinkable, then what's going on in the New Testament? Matthew 26, let's go there. Matthew 26, we're going to read verses 57 through 68. Matthew 26, 57 through 68. Now this is when Yahshua's on trial. Those who had seized Yahshua led him away to Caiaphas the high priest, where the scribes and the elders were gathered together. But Peter was following him at a distance, as far as the courtyard of the high priest, and entered in, and sat down with the officers to see the outcome. Now the chief priests and the whole council kept trying to obtain false testimony against Yahshua so that they might put him to death. They want to kill him. They don't have actual dirt on him. They don't have anything that they can actually condemn him on. So they're looking for false witnesses. They're actually to the point where they are going to violate one of the 10 commandments. Don't bear false witness against your neighbor. They are doing that because they want him shut down. There's nothing. That tells us right now, they have zero grounds. And if we go back to Deuteronomy 13, the false prophet test, if he had been going around telling everybody, hey guys, when I die, you guys don't have to keep the law anymore. What do we read about somebody that says that? If somebody says you don't need to keep the law, they're a false prophet. In my opinion, there's a reason why Brother Judah today does not accept Jesus as the Messiah, because they're told that he did away with the law. Why would you accept a Messiah who did away with the Torah? At knowing what we know, there's no setup anywhere that the Messiah is going to do away with the Torah. So when missionaries go out and say, hey, follow Jesus, by the way, he did away with the Torah, no, he's not their guy. They're smart enough to see that. They have the front of the book, Christians have the back of the book. Hopefully, we're trying to put the two sides together and have a complete picture here. So they did not find any, even though many false witnesses came forward, but later on 2 came forward and said, this man stated, I am able to destroy the temple of Elohim and to rebuild it in 3 days. And that's true, he did say that. The high priest stood up and said to him, do you not answer? What is it that these men are testifying against you? But Yahshua kept silent. The high priest said to him, I adjure you by the living Elohim that you tell us whether you are the Messiah, the son of Elohim. Yahshua said to him, you have said it yourself. Nevertheless, I tell you, hereafter you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of power and coming on the clouds of heaven. Then the high priest tore his robes and said, he has blasphemed. What further need do we have of witnesses? Behold, you have now heard the blasphemy. What do you think? They answered, he deserves death. Then they spat on his face and beat him with their fists, and others slapped him and said, prophesy to us, you Messiah. Who is the one who hit you? So what's the accusation here? After they bring forth false witnesses, because there's no actual accusation, he makes the point that he's the Messiah. Plainly says it. That's the accusation, blasphemy. There's no accusation of he's going around teaching people not to keep the customs of Moses. That would have been a really easy one. And they tried to trip him up on that. The scribes and Pharisees were coming to him all the time, asking him these questions, trying to get him in a gotcha moment. And he was smart enough to see through it and teach them something in the process. If he was going around telling people not to keep the commandments, they wouldn't have had to have gotten to this step. They wouldn't have needed false witnesses. They could have had true witnesses come and say, we heard him say that when he dies, we don't do Moses anymore. But that never happened. So the continuity of Torah is all about this logic. Okay, so now we're going to get into Acts. We're going to read about Stephen. We're getting in the home stretch here. We're going to go over to Acts chapter 6. We're going to read a good chunk through here because this is all really, really relevant. Acts chapter 6, we're going to start reading in verse 8. We're going to go through chapter 7. So good, like I said, a good chunk here, but this is really important. So Acts chapter 6, starting in verse 8. Stephen, full of grace and power, was performing great wonders and signs among the people. Didn't we read a caution about that? He's doing signs and wonders. So the people should be doing Deuteronomy 13. They should be saying, okay, here's a guy doing signs and wonders. Let's check his fruit. What's he doing with these signs and wonders? This could be a test from Yahweh to lead us away from the commandments. Okay, this should be in their heads. Whether it was or not, I don't know, but it should have been. But some men from what was called the synagogue of the freedmen, including both Cyrenians and Alexandrians, some from Cilicia and Asia, rose up and argued with Stephen. But they were unable to cope with the wisdom and the spirit with which he was speaking. Then they secretly induced men to say, we have heard him speak blasphemous words against Moses and against Elohim. Now, code language, when people talk about Moses, that's code for Torah. If you speak against Moses, you're speaking against the Torah. You're saying that we shouldn't keep the law in some capacity. Okay? They stirred up the people, the elders and the scribes. They came up to him, and they dragged him away and brought him before the council. They put forward false witnesses, here we go again, who said, this man incessantly speaks against this holy place and the Torah. So if false witnesses are saying that, what would the truth be? He's not speaking against the holy place, and he's not speaking against the Torah. Now, this is Stephen. This is after Calvary. This is after Acts 2. This is in the time frame when we're in the church age. We're in the age of grace. According to modern pastors, Stephen had every right to say, yeah, we don't need to do Moses anymore. Moses was abolished at the cross. But he's not. This is a false accusation. Okay? Continuity here. For we have heard him say we heard him say that this Nazarene Yahshua will destroy this place and alter the customs which Moses handed down to us, the Torah. So not even doing away, because when you alter something, you're not necessarily getting rid of it, you're changing it. So the false accusation is that he's going to change the Torah. That's a false accusation. So when we hear people from the pulpit saying he changed the law, Stephen would beg to differ. Fixing their gaze on him, all who were sitting at the council saw his face like the face of an angel. Chapter 7. The high priest said, are these things so? And I love this. He said, hear me, brethren and fathers. The Elohim of glory appeared to our father Abraham when he was in Mesopotamia, before he lived in Haran. He said to him, leave your country and your relatives and come into the land that I will show you. Then he left the land of the Chaldeans and settled in Haran. From there, after his father died, Elohim had him move to his country, in which you are now living. But he gave him no inheritance in it, not even a foot of ground, and yet, even when he had no child, he promised that he would give it to him as a possession and to his descendants after them. We read that earlier. But Elohim spoke to this effect, that his descendants would be as strangers in a foreign land, and that they would be enslaved and mistreated for 400 years. Whatever nation to which they will be in bondage, I myself will judge, said Elohim, and after that they will come out and serve me in this place. Now, I just want to pause real quick. Logically, if the law, if the Torah is bondage, if it's oppression, all of these negative things like we're taught, he's freeing them from slavery to the Egyptians and putting them right back under bondage. That doesn't make sense if you interpret this type of bondage in a negative way. But what did he say here? He talked about serving. He said, after that, they will come out and serve me in this place. Now, if I'm serving an employee, I am obligated to do what that employer, if I'm the employee, I'm obligated to do what my boss wants me to do. I'm serving them But there are certain things, there are requirements. There's a code of conduct. There are business expectations that I'm supposed to do. Is that law? Is it bondage? Is it burdensome? If you're lazy, maybe, yeah. But if you want to do good and you want to please your employer and you want to have a good relationship and do well, then yes, you do what you need to do to keep your boss's commandments. This is the thing. Serving of a willing heart will enable you to keep his commandments without grumbling. But it's that prideful instinct that we have, this, I don't need to be told what to do. That's what makes us rebel against this. And in my opinion, this is where the mainstream errs, because they provide a license for people to come out from under the conditions of that service. We define how we serve him. Without a written standard, every single one of us in this room and elsewhere gets to decide how we serve him. That's not fair, because what if I decide to serve him less than someone else? How is that fair to that person? They're going the extra mile to do more than I am. It's not right. It's not logical. Okay, so we were at verse 8. He gave him the covenant of circumcision, and so Abraham became the father of Isaac. He circumcised him on the 8th day, and Isaac became the father of Jacob, and Jacob of the 12 patriarchs. The patriarchs became jealous of Joseph and sold him into Egypt, yet Elohim was with him, and rescued him from all his afflictions, and granted him favor and wisdom in the sight of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. He made him governor over Egypt and all his household. Now a famine came over all Egypt and Canaan, and great affliction with it, and our fathers could find no food. But when Jacob heard that there was grain in Egypt, he sent our fathers there the first time. On the second visit, Joseph made himself known to his brothers, and Joseph's family was disclosed to Pharaoh. Then Joseph sent word and invited Jacob, his father, and all his relatives to come to him, 75 persons in all. I can just see the priests and the scribes here just kind of rolling their eyes, like, really, this guy's giving us a history lesson here? This guy? We're like the scholars. Okay, Jacob went down to Egypt, and there he and our fathers died. From there, they were removed to Shechem and laid in the tomb which Abraham had purchased for a sum of money from the sons of Hamor and Shechem. But as the time of the promise was approaching, which Elohim had assured to Abraham, the people increased and multiplied in Egypt, until there arose another king over Egypt who knew nothing about Joseph. It was he who took shrewd advantage of our race and mistreated our fathers, so that they would expose their infants, and they would not survive. It was at this time that Moses was born, and he was lovely in the sight of Elohim, and he was nurtured 3 months in his father's home. And after he had been set outside, Pharaoh's daughter took him away and nurtured him as her own son. Moses was educated in all the learning of the Egyptians, and he was a man of power in words and deeds. But when he was approaching the age of 40, it entered his mind to visit his brethren, the sons of Israel. When he saw one of them being treated unjustly, he defended him and took vengeance for the oppressed by striking down the Egyptian. He supposed that his brethren understood that Elohim was granting them deliverance through him, but they did not understand. On the following day, he appeared to them as they were fighting together, and he tried to reconcile them in peace, saying, "Men, you are brethren, why do you injure one another?" But the one who was injuring his neighbor pushed him away, saying, "Who made you a ruler and judge over us? You do not mean to kill me as you killed the Egyptian yesterday, do you?" At this remark, Moses fled and became a stranger in the land of Midian, where he became the father of 2 sons. After 40 years had passed, an angel appeared to him in the wilderness of Mount Sinai in the flame of a burning thorn bush. When Moses saw it, he marveled at the sight, and as he approached to look more closely, there came the voice of Yahweh. "I am the Elohim of your fathers, the Elohim of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob." Moses shook with fear and would not venture to look. But Yahweh said to him, "Take off the sandals from your feet, for the place on which you are standing is holy ground. I have certainly seen the oppression of my people in Egypt, and have heard their groans, and I have come down to rescue them. Come now, and I will send you to Egypt." This Moses, whom they disowned, remember we keep talking about the customs of Moses, Moses being equivalent with the Torah, saying, "Who made you a ruler and a judge?" This is the one whom Elohim sent to be both a ruler and a deliverer, with the help of the angel who appeared to him in the thorn bush. This man led them out, performing wonders and signs in the land of Egypt, in the Red Sea, and in the wilderness for 40 years. This is the Moses who said to the sons of Israel, "Yahweh will raise up for you a prophet like me from your brethren." This is the one who was in the congregation in the wilderness together with the angel who was speaking to him on Mount Sinai, and who was with our fathers, and he received living oracles to pass on to you. That would be the Torah. Our fathers were unwilling to be obedient to him, but repudiated him in their hearts. They turned back to Egypt, saying to Aaron, "Make us gods whom will go before us. For this Moses who led us out of the land of Egypt, we do not know what happened to him." At that point, they made a calf and brought a sacrifice to the idol and were rejoicing in the works of their hands. But Elohim turned away and delivered them up to serve the host of heaven, as it is written in the book of the prophets. It is not for me that you offered victims and sacrifices 40 years in the wilderness, was it, O house of Israel? You also took along the tabernacle of Molech and the star and the god Rompha, the images which you made to worship. I also will remove you beyond Babylon. Our fathers had the tabernacle of testimony in the wilderness, just as he who spoke to Moses directed him to make it according to the pattern which he had seen. Having received it in turn, the fathers brought it with Joshua upon dispossessing the nations whom Elohim drove out before our fathers until the time of David. David found favor in Elohim's sight and asked that he might find a dwelling place for the God of Jacob. But it was Solomon who built a house for him. However, the Most High does not dwell in houses made by human hands, as the prophet says, heaven is my throne and the earth is the footstool of my feet. What kind of house will you build for me, says Yahweh? Or what place is there for my repose? Was it not my hand which made all these things? You men who are stiff-necked and uncircumcised in heart and ears, always resisting the Holy Spirit, you are doing just as your fathers did. Which one of the prophets did your fathers not persecute? They killed those who had previously announced the coming of the righteous one, whose betrayers and murderers you have now become. How far did I want to go? Yeah, okay. You have received the law as ordained by angels and yet did not keep it. So Stephen, remember, this is after Calvary. He is going after these guys hard for their handling of the Torah. They're hypocrites. They are claiming to have a degree of righteousness, claiming to have the authority to pass these judgments, and they don't keep the Torah themselves. And he's reminding them of their own history, basically to shame them, I think. I think it worked. They were pretty upset with him when he got done. But what grounds does Stephen have to bring this up after Calvary if the law was done away with? If the law was done away with, then these people can do however they want with the law. There's no standard anymore. They can behave however they see fit, but he's holding them to account for their treatment, actually mistreatment of the Torah. So this is huge. And this is after it says that there were false witnesses brought forth to say that Stephen was preaching against the law of Moses. So not only is he not preaching against the law of Moses, but he's holding these people accountable for their handling of the law of Moses, something that you wouldn't need to do after Calvary if the Christian church is correct. So again, this is another logical point that shows continuity. Stephen's actions and his words make no sense if he was aware that the law was done away with prior to this episode. Maybe it was, and he just didn't get the memo, but it says he was full of the Holy Spirit. So did the Holy Spirit just forget to clue him in on this very important detail and just let him go out here, and he was willing to give his life for this information? Pretty big deal. Okay? Now we're going to go over to Acts 21, and we're going to read about Paul. People like to say, but Paul says. I like to say, but Paul did. I like to go to Acts and show what Paul actually did. And I like to point out that it's called the Acts of the Apostles, not the beliefs of the apostles. We're expected to do things of what we believe, act upon our faith, not just believe it or a whole doctrine. So Acts 21, we're going to start reading in verse 15. This is Paul at Jerusalem. This is towards the end of his ministry. After these days, we got ready and started on our way up to Jerusalem. Some of the disciples from Caesarea also came with us, taking us to Manasseh of Cyprus, a disciple of long standing with whom we were to lodge. After we arrived in Jerusalem, the brethren received us gladly. And the following day, Paul went in with us up to James, and all the elders were present. After he had greeted them, he began to relate one by one the things which Elohim had done among the Gentiles, the nations, through his ministry. When they had heard it, they began glorifying Elohim. And they said to him, you see, brother, how many thousands there are among the Jews of those who have believed, and they are all zealous for the law. Okay, now, let's slow down and think. This is several years. This is over 10 years, depending on who's doing the chronology, after Calvary. You've got Jewish believers who are zealous for the law. Did they not get the memo? And Paul has already written Galatians at this point. Did they not read Galatians? Why are they zealous for the Torah if they're believing in Yahshua as the Messiah and they're Jews? They didn't have a problem with this. For whatever reason, there wasn't this thing that says you can't have one and not the other. Like, they were able to have both. Okay, so verse 21, they have all been told about you, that you are teaching all the Jews who were among the Gentiles to forsake Moses telling them not to circumcise their children nor to walk according to the custom. Tomorrow morning, on Sunday, there will be this message. This will be somebody's sermon. We're Gentiles. We don't have to do the stuff that the Jews do. We don't have to do Moses anymore. And people are thinking Paul is saying this. So the issue is, people think that you're saying, I'm just going to put it in modern terms, people think that you're going around teaching what is being taught in Christian churches 2,000 years from now. We know that's not true. So whatever Paul was saying was being misunderstood then in the same way it's being misunderstood now. And they're aware of this. It was already a problem. So verse 22, what then is to be done? They will certainly hear that you've come. Therefore, do this that we tell you. We have 4 men who were under a vow. This is a Nazarite vow. This is in the Torah. What are we taught? If you keep one of those commandments from the law, you have to keep it all. Okay, well, let's apply that to Paul here. And there's animal sacrifice involved in the temple. Take them and purify yourself along with them and pay their expenses so that they may shave their heads. And all will know that there is nothing to the things which they have been told about you, but that you yourself also walk orderly, keeping the Torah. So here's a clear case of Paul. Everybody knows he's keeping the Torah, but people are misunderstanding his writings. And they're making the case, based on that misunderstanding, that he's teaching not to keep the Torah. That's the thing that's wrong. The disciples here all know that it's wrong, and they're like, let's do something. Let's find something in the law that's really, really engaged so that when you do this thing and people will see it, there's no doubt that you keep the law. You are pro-Torah when you do this thing and people see it. There's not a single Sunday pastor in the world that would advocate going into the temple in Christian times and doing a Nazarite vow, because that would be under the law. That would be sacrifice. That would be Jewish stuff, however they want to frame it. But yet here Paul is going and doing that to show that he is zealous for the law. Okay, verse 25, but concerning the Gentiles who have believed, we wrote, having decided that they should abstain from meat sacrificed to idols, this is referring back to Acts 15, from blood and from that which is strangled, and from fornication. Then Paul took the men, and the next day, purifying himself along with them, went into the temple, giving notice of the completion of the days of purification until the sacrifice was offered for each one of them. So Paul apparently didn't read Galatians. Paul didn't know that if you keep the law, you've fallen from grace, because here he is doing something very specific in the Torah. So Paul didn't interpret his own words apparently the way we do today. So the Torah is continuous. There wasn't anything in Paul's mind, regardless of how we read Galatians or Hebrews or whatever, that leads us to think that he actually thought that the law was done away with at Calvary. And of course, we can dig into the language and what was nailed to the cross was actually the handwriting of ordinances, which was against us. That's our accusation. That's our list of sin. That's the stuff we've done. That's against us. The Torah was never against us. It's our own deeds that testify against us. So Paul was definitely pro-Torah. And Peter's going to tell us so. Let's go to 2 Peter 3. I'm getting ready to wrap up. 2 Peter 3. Some of you guys know exactly what I'm going to read here. And I'm going to read the whole chapter. 2 Peter 3. This is now, beloved, the second letter I'm writing to you. That's why it's 2 Peter and not 1 Peter. In which I am stirring up your sincere mind by way of reminder that you should remember the words spoken beforehand by the holy prophets and the commandments of of the Master and Savior spoken by your apostles. Okay, he doesn't specify New Testament prophets. There were New Testament prophets. He specifies prophets. So the Old Testament prophets are in this basket, and he wants us to remember what they said. Know this, first of all, that in the last days, mockers will come with their mocking, following after their own lusts, and saying, where is the promise of his coming? For ever since the fathers fell asleep, all continues just as it was from the beginning of creation. For when they maintain this, it escapes their notice that by the word of Elohim the heavens existed long ago, and the earth was formed out of water and by water, through which the world at that time was destroyed, being flooded with water. But by his word, the present heavens and earth are being reserved by fire, kept for the day of judgment and destruction of ungodly men. But do not let this one fact escape your notice, beloved, that with the Lord, one day is like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years like one day. The Lord is not slow about his promise, as some count slowness, but is patient toward you, not wishing for any to perish, but for all to come to repentance. But the day of Yahweh will come like a thief, in which the heavens will pass away with the roar, and the elements will be destroyed with intense heat, and the earth and its works will be burned up. Now remember, Moses called heaven and earth as witnesses against us in regards to the covenant and the Torah. So this heaven and earth thing is really important here. Since all these things are to be destroyed in this way, what sort of people ought you to be in holy conduct and godliness, looking for and hastening the coming of the day of Elohim, because of which the heavens will be destroyed by burning, and the elements which melt will melt with intense heat. But according to his promise, we are looking for new heavens and a new earth, in which righteousness dwells. Therefore, beloved, since you look for these things, be diligent to be found by him in peace, spotless and blameless, and regard the patience of our master as salvation, just as also our beloved brother Paul, according to the wisdom given to him, wrote to you, as also in all his letters, speaking in them of these things, in which there are some things hard to understand, which the untaught and unstable distort, as they do also the rest of the scriptures, to their own destruction. You therefore, beloved, knowing this beforehand, be on your guard, so that you are not carried away by the error of unprincipled men, and fall from your own steadfastness, but grow in the grace and knowledge of our Master and Savior, Yahshua the Messiah. To him be the glory, both now and to the day of eternity. Amen. And this is where I think that we have a huge problem, and there's really no way around it, because we have the book here, and it's the whole book. So, like, we have Genesis all the way to Revelation. Paul's in that. And everybody has different experiences. My experience was, and I've seen this through 20 years of talking to people, the churches will typically go right to the Gospels, maybe John 3 or something, to show that, hey, we're sinners and we need to be saved. But then they go to Paul, and they spend a lot of time in Paul, because there's a lot of good stuff in Paul. Paul was taught the law from the time he was a wee little baby, a small guy. He was like a master scribe. He knew the Torah better than anybody in this room will ever achieve in our lifetime, most likely. He was like the expert of experts about the Torah. Okay? And so we're going to go to his writings, which if we were like going to like college theology, Paul's letters should be like master's level or graduate level. You got to go through bachelor's and stuff first. But instead, in the churches, we go right to Paul. And this is what he just said here. You do that without understanding of the rest of the scriptures, and you're going to twist Paul's scriptures. You're going to twist his words. You're going to misunderstand what he's saying, and you're going to go after unprincipled men. That word, some translations say lawless. Technically, it's not anomia. It's a different word, but it's kind of functionally the same. These are people who don't have principles that are grounded in law. These are basically people that are unscrupulous. These are people that just kind of do whatever they want according to their own lusts. They have no foundation. You're going to twist Paul's writings and go after those guys because you don't understand what came before Paul. So part of this teaching is to start off in the Old Testament and show the foundation for, forever, perpetual, throughout your generations. The law's great, the law's holy, the law's righteous, do the law and you'll succeed, all this kind of stuff. Why would all of a sudden that change when we turn over into Matthew? It doesn't make sense. And if you go into it thinking that it does make sense, of course you'll misinterpret Paul. If we started off in America teaching our kids the Old Testament first, starting in Genesis and working them through, and some of us are doing this, some of us that have come along and have kids, my family's doing this, my kids are young, my kids have been in this Torah thing for their whole lives. But with somebody like that, you can start off in Genesis and work through left to right and work your way up to Paul. But when you start off with Paul with like a 10-year-old and start trying to teach these advanced things before you've even gotten into the law and the prophets, that kid has no chance to understand what's actually being said by Paul. They're going to be off on their own foot. And it's not their fault. This is what happens when you put the cart ahead of the horse. Revelation 21, we're almost done. Revelation 21. And remember, heaven and earth were called to witness. Revelation 21, verse 1 through 8. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth passed away. Just like Peter said, there was no longer any sea. I saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from Elohim, made ready as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, Behold, the tabernacle of Elohim is among men, and he will dwell among them, and they shall be his people, and Elohim himself will be among them. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and there will no longer be any death. There will no longer be any mourning or crying or pain. The first things have passed away. And he who sits on the throne said, Behold, I am making all things new. And he said, Write, for these words are faithful and true. Then he said to me, It is done. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. I will give to the one who thirsts from the spring of the water of life without cost. He who overcomes will inherit these things, and I will be his Elohim, and he will be my son. But for the cowardly and unbelieving and abominable and murderers and immoral persons and sorcerers and idolaters and all liars, their part will be in the lake that burns with fire and brimstone, which is the second death. And one of the seven angels who had the seven bowls full of the seven last plagues came and spoke with me, saying, Come here, I will show you the bride and the wife of the Lamb. And we'll just stop there. But this is important because we were taught that when he said, and it's not the same Greek word. When he says, it is done here, it's not the same word as it is finished on the cross. Completely different word. But when we say, and I've heard this before, when he said, it is finished, he was talking about the law. He was on the cross basically saying, well, I'm dying and I'm on my way out. And before I go, I want you guys to all know that you don't have to keep the law anymore. That's what he really meant when he said, it is finished. If we think logically, the it that's finished is his work that he came to accomplish up to that point. He was done. Mission accomplished, so to speak. Everything that the prophet said he was going to do when he came was done. It's finished. There's nothing contextually that would lead us to think that saying it is finished means the law is finished, the Torah is finished. He could have just said that. He could have just said the law is done. So he's not talking about that. Same thing here. It is finished. Yes, it's a different word, but it is done, it is finished, kind of means the same thing. So if I'm going to say, like, the law was finished at Calvary because he says it is finished, can I then say it is done means the law is done away with here in Revelation? That doesn't make sense because supposedly it was done away with 2,000 years or whatever prior to this. So we have to be careful with how we interpret these little phrases. We have to look at the context. And I know people in this room understand context. Some of the younger people are still learning what context means, and maybe some of the older people too. But it's important to understand, like, you can't just take a phrase and say, well, that means this, or that means this all the time. It's really easy to do. Every time we see a phrase, it means the same thing. Not always. We'll finish up in Matthew. We'll go back to Matthew. I mentioned Matthew 5. We've got to read it. Matthew 5. And this is his first public sermon. This is the first time he has gone out and preached to the public. So he knows ahead of time that people are going to misunderstand what he says. People are going to misrepresent what he says. We saw it at his trial. They're trying to dig up. They're always trying to catch him in his words. He knows that going into this. He knows what's coming. So there's a reason why he says these words. Matthew 5. Let's start reading in verse 17. Do not think. We should just stop there and don't think. And a lot of our problems will be resolved, right? Do not think that I came to abolish the law or the prophets. I did not come to abolish, but to fulfill. So if we can say he's going to fulfill the prophets, it is finished. He did what the prophets said he was going to do. Then he didn't cancel the prophets by doing that. There are still some prophecies he has yet to fulfill. Logically, we don't say, yeah, he didn't fulfill the prophets totally. There's still some stuff he's going to do, but he did do away with the law. No. He's saying, I came to fulfill, talking about the law and the prophets, and he said, I did not come to abolish, meaning the law or the prophets. So if the prophets are not abolished, why would we assume the law was? Doesn't make sense. For truly I say to you, until heaven and earth pass away, like we just saw in Revelation, which hasn't happened yet, not the smallest letter or stroke shall pass from the law until all is accomplished. And then people will say, well, he accomplished the law. He did the law, so we don't have to. What part of I didn't come to abolish did we miss? Like, abolish doesn't, like, you can't say that. I've gotten into some heated discussions with people over the years where they insist he abolished the law. He fulfilled it. He just said he didn't come to abolish it. And you're saying that by fulfilling it, he abolished it. Like, you know, it just doesn't compute. But we get these things in our head and we just can't break free. Whoever then annuls or cancels one of the least of these commandments and teaches others to do the same shall be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But in our modern times, we're taught the opposite. The preachers that go out and teach people not to keep the commandments, that's what you're supposed to do. That's the gospel. Let's go out and do it. We're saved. We don't have to do the law anymore. That's the opposite of what he's saying here. And what he's saying here is consistent with what was set up in Moses and the prophets. That foundation stands. Whoever keeps and teaches them shall be called great in the kingdom of heaven. So he's talking about the law. So if I keep and teach the law, I'm told by the mainstream that I've fallen from grace. But what does he say? I'm going to be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I say to you that unless your righteousness surpasses that of the scribes and Pharisees, you will not enter the kingdom of heaven. How do we define the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees? Obviously, the stuff they did, their adherence to Torah. But where they fell short typically was with their heart. Their heart was missing. The whole empty, the whitewashed tombs, the cup is dirty on the inside, all that stuff. If we can find some way to keep his commandments, which Yahweh told Moses is possible, he can do his commandments. But if we can find a way to do that for the right reasons, in the right spirit, that's the ideal. That's the part that the mainstream is missing. The mainstream wants to have the spirit and feel spiritual and love and all this stuff, which is great, but there's no underlying expectations for how we should behave, other than this general morality of whatever is taught from the pulpit. It's like, we'll go to Paul, and we'll say, well, homosexuality is a sin. Okay, well, that's from the Torah. Torah specifically says, don't do that. It's an abomination. Well, Paul said. So therefore, that's the continuity there. Paul said, don't do it. Okay, so why did Paul think it was a sin? Like, did we stop and think, what triggered Paul to think that that was a sin? Is it just some basic morality thing that we're just supposed to all know? I would say, yeah, kind of. But not everybody does. Paul had a knowledge of the Torah. So all he's doing is restating something that was already stated in the Torah. And that goes to this other point. I was taught growing up that the only commandments that Christians have to keep are the ones that are spelled out in the New Testament. Has anybody else heard that? If it's spelled out in the New Testament, we're supposed to do it as Christians. If it's not spelled out, we don't have to. So I can go out and move my neighbor's boundary post. And I can move it over 6 feet his direction and make my property a little bit bigger so I can have a bigger garden. It's okay, because it never says not to in the New Testament. We all know that's wrong. That would be theft. But that's a commandment from the Old Testament. So little things like this. And these are things I encourage everyone. You can look at this and you can find little things like this logically that should carry over into the New Testament. And if they don't carry over into the New Testament, things don't make sense. We're basically just making stuff up and being arbitrary and just being capricious with how we're viewing things. So there is continuity with the Torah. We can maybe revisit this at some other point and kind of go into more detail. But in my mind, this is just kind of a framework of understanding. When people come to us and they're like, well, why do you keep the commandments? We're free from the commandments. If you're not a chapter and verse person and you can't go to chapters and verses and spell it out, at least you can understand the logic. At least you can understand why. Fundamentally, what are the concepts involved? And as we read our scriptures, we can hopefully pull more out of this. There's a lot that I could have pulled out here. Like I said, we could have been here 3 or 4 hours if I pulled out more scripture. But I want to take it easy on you guys because it's a beautiful day out here and everybody's going to want to get outside and get some sun and enjoy the weather. And I want to talk with you guys too. I'm being selfish. I want to chat and fellowship. So I'll close it at that. The continuity of Torah is 100%, I think, ironclad bulletproof. I don't think it's disputable. And we can debate on the finer points of how to keep specific commandments. That's valid. Because some of the commandments are kind of vague. Some of them are more concrete. But the fact that they are all on the table, I think, is bulletproof. And I think we have a case for that. So at this point, how long did I go? Not terrible, about an hour. I'll open the floor for questions, comments, and strong opinions.